On the phone with me is the head coach of the Kelly Walsh Trojans in his third season. That's Aaron Makelky. And, Coach, off to a nice 2-0 start for your ball club. I guess, first of all, let's start with what have you learned about your team through the first couple of games of this season?
We've learned a lot. We've had the chance to do some off-season stuff and some camps and lifting that we haven't done the first 2 years that I've been here. And so this is a tight group that's had a lot more time to prepare and be around each other than the last two groups. I think the thing we learned last week is they're gritty and they found a way to get out a tough win at the end against a good Central team.
Now you've got a big test, and we'll talk about the Tigers coming up. But first, talk about your main weapon, Cam Burkett, and just how special of a football player is he now that you've had him for 3 seasons?
Yeah, we knew back when he was a sophomore he was a special guy, and the thing that I tell people is just a combination of size, speed, skill, football IQ. I've never coached a guy, or I don't think I've coached against a guy that's been as talented as he is in all those areas. I've coached faster guys and bigger guys, but none with that combination of size and speed and athleticism. And he's a weapon, and he can do a lot of different things. He can run the ball, he can catch the ball, he can return. He's a pretty darn good linebacker on defense, too.
Now, you lost a 2-year starter quarterback last season. So how are you seeing the development of Hunter Mogan in the first couple of games this year?
Yeah, he's got big shoes to fill. We graduated a guy that set 4 school records last year and was a great leader for our team and in our locker room. So we knew whoever was going to step up into that role, it's a big job. He's done his best game. He just didn't get a lot of reps, and that was nothing to do with him. It was just us trying to get other guys in there when the score was the way it was early. And then last week, he did some things well. We didn't throw the ball often enough to give him really a fair body of work to judge. But, he's going to improve at that. We have some good guys around him that can help and pick up the slack, and he doesn't have to do it all himself. So we're excited to see how he plays this Friday night.
Where do you think you're at early in the season trying to develop more weapons to help Hunter at QB, but also kind of take the big attention away from Cam?
Better than I thought we would be. We've had some guys step up, some young guys. We've got some wideouts. We really were worried that would be an area we would be short, and we lost a lot of productivity in our passing game besides the quarterback. But all of our guys that caught meaningful balls last year graduated. And so we've been pleasantly surprised, and we've got a few guys that are still battling for spots and some depth there in our backfield and at wideout. And I think the biggest thing that'll help Hunter is actually our front. Our front 5, this is the best group we've had by far. 3 seniors and 2 juniors up there on the offensive line, and I think that can help as much as anybody at a skill position.
Well, let's talk about your defense. Obviously, gotten off to a pretty good start on that side of the football. What have you seen from some of your defensive leaders early in the season? Guys like Eric Holsheiser, Jesse Thornton, just to name a couple of guys that kind of, stand out maybe statistically, but, it's more than that. I know it's a team effort, but what have you seen on that side of the football, Coach?
Yeah, well, let's start with Jesse, man. We call him Juice, and he is an energetic, enthusiastic, wild man of a linebacker, and just a great kid. And he's the emotional leader of our defense for sure. He's not the biggest or the strongest, but man, he just plays his butt off and does everything that we ask and really sets the tone up front. And I haven't looked at the defensive stats, but he's got to be our leader in tackles for a loss. So he really sets the tone emotionally. Holsheiser, he's a guy that's not real imposing when you look at him on paper, but when you turn on the film, he flies around, he smacks people, and I'll tell you what, he's got a nose for the football. He's forced multiple fumbles. He's got an interception to his name, and we practice turnovers every day, and he's just a guy that finds a way to make those things show up on Friday night.
Well, let's talk about the big matchup. You go to Rock Springs to take on the Tigers, and this is something that's never happened between these two teams in all the times you guys have played, meaning Rock Springs is 2-0, Kelly Walsh is 2-0. What do you see when you see Coach Lenhardt's ball club in this big game?
Both of us came in the same year, and part of our directive from our schools and community was to break up the 4A has always been dominated by these 4 teams, and you guys, the rest, are all just kind of outsiders, bottom feeders, and you'll never be in the top. And we're not there yet, but I think the big difference in 4A, especially this year, is there might be a few teams at the bottom, and then, man, I gotta say the top 5, 6, maybe even 7 teams are going to be all pretty even, and there's going to be some upsets, and I don't think anybody's going to steamroll the other 9 teams. And so there's some parity, which makes it interesting, makes it fun, and he's done a great job building a program. You know, his philosophy is they're pretty unorthodox. They're very multiple. They when you run the scouting report on his offense, it breaks your spreadsheet because there's so many different formations, personnel groups, motions, unbalanced, just things that you don't normally see, and he does so many different ones all at the same time. And does a great job teaching it to his kids because they don't get illegal formation penalties or motion issues or substitution penalties. So they're very good at what they do, and they have a major weapon with number 26, their tight end. They line him up all over, but I guess we'll call him a tight end. He's a big body. He's an athlete. He's a good defensive end on the other side of the ball. But I think their quarterback probably scares me the most. From what I've seen, he's got to be one of the best guys in 4A. He can scramble and pick up first downs with his legs. He makes great decisions. He's a good passer. And he can kind of do it all, and he's done a great job getting the ball out in space to their athletes and not turning it over. So that's a huge challenge for us matchup-wise. And on defense, they do some similar things. They're very multiple. They're not static. They don't just give you one look, so you got to be prepared for really 3 different things.
So with all that in mind, and I don't want you to divulge your game plan, Coach, but what do you talk to your team about in terms of some maybe basic keys to keep you guys in a game and give you a chance to win Friday night?
Yeah, well, the biggest one is we got a tough road trip. It's the longest one, and for whatever reason, Rock Springs has come to us both of the last 2 years in a row. So most of our kids and coaches have not made that road trip before, so that's going to be a challenge in and of itself. I think the other big one is we just got to match up and be sound and align correctly. You know, on film, they've gotten some defenses to miss a line and leave a wide receiver completely uncovered and blow some assignments because it's going to be tough to beat them when we line up right. But if we don't line up correctly and do things sound, you know, you don't stand a chance against a good team like them. So we got to keep them from exploiting that stuff. And the biggest thing is you got to do your identity. You know, the saying is you got to dance with the girl that you brought, and we do things one way, and we're not going to change it too much for them. We're going to adapt it, of course, but we're not going to reinvent the wheel and get away from our base stuff that got us where we are today.
I certainly understand. Well, Coach Makelky, thank you so much for your time today. Best luck Friday against the Tigers in Rock Springs.
Yes, thank you, David.
We continue our conversation for the WyoPreps fan-voted Big School Game of the Week. It is number 1 Rock Springs hosting the 5th-ranked Kelly Walsh Trojans, and kind enough to visit with me for a second straight week. Maybe he's a glutton for punishment. I don't know. Mark Lenhardt, the head coach of the Rock Springs Tigers. And first of all, Mark, I know you're a coach, so you're not happy totally, but you still have to be pretty pleased with the way your team played and the big win at previously top-ranked Thunder Basin last week.
Yeah, I mean, I like the fact that we got off to a fast start. And anytime you're out on the road and you can do that, you're going to give yourself a chance. And so I'm proud of our kids. You know, that's the first time. I'm not sure how long Thunder Basin's been in existence, but it's the first time we beat them here in Rock Springs. And so, you know, anytime you can check a box and kind of get that monkey off your back, that's a big thing. And so, you know, I'm proud of our players. You know, I thought we responded pretty well. I thought, you know, we had a couple mistakes, but we played a relatively clean game for the most part. But, you know, it is just week 2, and we've got to continue to improve and get better because our schedule doesn't get any easier, starting with Kelly this week and Sheridan the week after that and then Trona the week after that. So there's obviously a lot of work to do.
Speaking of that, though, how did your team react in that big game atmosphere? I mean, let's face it, you guys are have been trying to build the program back up, and I know you brought Coach Christensen back from the good old days of when Rock Springs won back-to-back titles in 2001 and 2002. How did you see your team handle that big game atmosphere?
To be honest with you, David, I don't think we treated it any differently than we treated any other game. I mean, I think there was a little bit of nerves early and getting used to Thunder's tempo on offense because they run their offense at a really quick pace. You just can't simulate it in practice. But I don't feel like our players ever didn't feel like we weren't going to go up there and have every chance to win the game. And so part of that's just having guys who've played a lot. They played a lot of football. And when you're starting guys who've played over 20 games, from their sophomore year to now, there's not a lot that they're going to be in awe of. And so that was good in the fact that we went up there and got the win. Now our main objective and goal is to try and find a way to learn how to deal with success, because that brings its whole new set of challenges.
Speaking of that, Brock Biter, your quarterback, has gone off to a good start, and I thought he played very well last season. What have you seen in his development that maybe has allowed him to maybe elevate his game even further here in his senior season?
Well, he continues to learn the system, and last year he learned it. Now he's learning, like we're thinking more even on the same page in terms of what him and I both want. And I think Brock's biggest asset is his ability to not make mistakes. I mean, he knows when to pull it down and run. I think he's improved his athleticism. He's gotten faster. He did track. I think he's gotten stronger in the weight room, and he made some plays with his feet the other night when we didn't have anybody open in extended drives. And, when you've got to cover our receivers who are pretty good and then stop our run game, then all of a sudden the quarterback's a threat to run. It gets very difficult to deal with. So I'm just really, really pleased with Brock and basically just his overall maturation and growth from his sophomore year to now. He's really improved as much as any kid I've ever coached.
We've talked about Caden and we've talked about Isaac, but what about your entire defense and maybe some guys that have shown you a little something in the first couple games that perhaps you weren't expecting?
Well, I think it's kind of started with our guys up front. We're not the biggest team, but, we're quick, and we've kind of gone to more of a defense where we've been really big the last few years and a touch more on the slow side. We've gone with a little more of slanting and moving, and it fits our system well. And I think that Colton Carlson has played really well, Jace Marler, Jake Eddy, those guys up front. Kelton Bornasian at linebackers played as good at 2 games as he's played in his career here. And, anytime you got Andrew Scores at corner, he's the kind of guy who can be that good boundary corner who can lock up a receiver and give you every opportunity to play coverage to the field. So they've all had their moments of good, and they've all had their moments of bad. But what I'm really liking more than anything is this group of kids just plays very, very hard, and they don't spend a lot of time looking in the rearview mirror. They focus on the next play, and hopefully we can continue to do that.
Now, your defense did face somewhat similar offenses with what the 2 Gillette schools run. How do you kind of get ready for something different with what Kelly Walsh throws at you Friday night?
Well, that's a good question. I mean, you really have to game plan just for Kelly Walsh. And, they're a base option football team, but they mix in fly sweep and, they don't just run like beer option. They'll run some load option where they'll get a fullback out in front, and then they have a play action pass off every one of their runs. And so discipline is extremely important every week you play, but this week especially we have to be assignment sharp. And, ultimately when you draw up option football on the board, there's always, when you're just playing on the board, there's always going to be a way to move the ball. And so ultimately we have to find a way to get off blocks and win some one-on-one battles, because that's really what it comes down to. And so, Coach Makelky's done a good job, and they're playing good football, and they got a great player, and the Burkett kid, and we're going to have our hands full with him.
I was going to say, how do you kind of slow down Cam Burkett?
I think the biggest thing with a guy like that is we want to try and make him run east-west as much as possible. When you get a big kid like that with that kind of speed running north and south, we don't have a lot of guys on our roster who are going to be able to square up and tackle him. I don't think anybody does. And so it's got to be a team effort. We've got to gang tackle. We've got to do a good job of, winning the battle at the line of scrimmage so we can get all his momentum going downhill. And then we have to wrap up as a group. And so, a big emphasis this week was for everybody to get to the ball. But a player like that's going to make some plays. And I think, our best defense this week could be our offense in terms of if we can get out and get a lead and make them do things that they maybe don't want to do, that could be a big advantage for us.
What are you seeing from the Kelly Walsh defense when you watch film?
Well, they're base 3-4, and they slant and move, and They're going to bring blitzes from all kinds of different areas, and they'll mix up their coverages. And, when you look at them, they play a lot of guys, and so they're going to stay fresh. And I'm really impressed with some of their D linemen, and I think that they've really improved in that regard. But overall, they just seem to put out, 15 to 20 good athletes who just kind of fit what they want to do, and they play their scheme very, very well.
Mark, with that, I'll let you go. I greatly appreciate your time. Once again, best of luck in our big school game of the week hosting 5th-ranked K-Dub.
All right, thanks, David. Appreciate it.